Gentlemen, my name is Jeff DeVerter. I'm so excited to be back, yes, for another fun episode of Cloud Talk Live. All right, welcome to Tuesday, everybody. Tuesday at 8:30. I don't feel like we've done a solid one at Tuesday at 8:30 for a little while. We've had some strange schedules going on, but I'm so glad that you're here today. My name, of course, is Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist for us here at Rackspace Technology, and I'm so glad that you have joined us here today. Now, what I'd love for you to do, if you remember the rules, if you've been around here before, is to introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you are in the chat down below on whatever platform you happen to be watching this on, because we don't want to just talk to you. We want to talk with you, and the only way to do that is to know your name. And I'd just like to know where in the world you're from. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Now, if you'd like to get a hold of us also, you can send us an email over at solve@rackspace.com. You can give us some feedback. You can give us some ideas about shows. We've had some folks sending a few ideas in for guests lately, which has been a lot of fun. So go ahead and introduce yourselves. The chat seems quiet this morning. Of course, we've also had some connectivity issues. So maybe you're talking, maybe I can't hear, but that's all right. I am excited about our program today, but I do, of course, have a few things to fill you in on before we get going. First is, if we're not already best buds over on the LinkedIn, I'd love for you to connect with me. You can find me at /Jeff J DeVerter, just like my name, Jeff. And you can keep up with all the things we're talking about over there. Of course, you must be following Rackspace if you're here, but if not, make sure you're doing that as well. Now, also, new podcast getting recorded all the time right now, and Daniel scratches his head going, if you just give me some descriptions, we could post those things. But if you're not following us, you don't have a subscription to our podcast, which you can find anywhere, and that podcast name is Cloud Talk, well, you're not going to get that content. So go ahead and follow that. Now, I have some really exciting news, and that is we've been working on our latest bit of research, and we've been doing it all spring. Actually started it before we even went off on Christmas break. But the new research is out. It's the Global AI Report. We talked to over 1,420 IT decision makers in 10 different countries. Can you believe that? Work with an amazing research firm out of the UK. We work with our smart people to craft a really interesting set of questions. We work with AWS on that too, to come up with some great, ultimately questions that we can go out and ask the world about what's happening in AI in their space. Now, it's now available over at rackspace.com/solve. Just head over there. There's an infographic that has all sorts of information free to the world. Actually, everything's free, but if you want to get the whole report, you do have to give us some basic email information. It's not a lot, but I'd love for you to connect to us there. Now, if you want to get some greater in-depth on that report, we are going to have our Solve Summit. That is coming up on May 7th. This year is just flying by, isn't it? So May 7th, we're going to do that live, and we have some great guests. It's an hour-long program. We're going to dig into all of the details. You know what's going to make that a better program for you is if you get the report and read it and have some questions, because you can ask us those questions live during the program. And I've been talking to the folks over in our facilities group and our media group, and I think we're going to be able to do this live from our new corporate offices here in San Antonio. TBD on that. I know Gracie is shaking her head going, Jeff, you shouldn't be saying these things if it's not going to happen. But I really hope it's going to happen. So think happy thoughts, folks. All right, well, let's get into the program today. I am delighted to have one of the next in our group of geniuses as it relates to the Microsoft space here at Rackspace and how to prepare for Copilot. Now, Corey Ostrowski is going to join us. He is a solution architect here at Rackspace. He's brand new, effectively, this year, joining us, and I'm so glad that he brings a wealth of knowledge to us. And we're going to dig into some of the things that you may not have thought about if your company is thinking about launching Microsoft Copilot. So with that, Corey, come on up here. Let's dig into the conversation. Corey, welcome to the program. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. Great to have this talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now you're coming to us from Missouri, if memory serves.
Yeah, Springfield, Missouri, big town of Bass Pro and O'Reilly's.
Those are some pretty decent things to be known for.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, normally our little live feed or chat thing is going bananas, but we've had some LinkedIn challenges in getting that data from them. But this is a global audience. Everyone, we're so glad that you're here. I should bring up a LinkedIn thing just so I can see your chats. In fact, Corey, why don't you introduce yourselves? Give us a little bit of background on you so that we know. In fact, you and I have the same background effectively. We both started in this little Microsoft program called SharePoint. Now, you go back a little farther than that, but why don't you pick it up at SharePoint for a second while I see if I can find some chats.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of started off in web design and graphic design, and then got into this little thing called SharePoint when the IT department goes, hey, can you put this up for us? And went to multiple little in-town trade meetings, figure out how to do it, and then that's kind of how my career got started. So I was a SharePoint engineer for 8 to 10 years before that, and slowly got into 365, and then got a buddy that was super going, hey, this really works out for you. Why don't you come over and do the pre-sale side? So this is kind of where I'm at today. So I've been doing that for the past 6 years or so, and now I'm here at RefSpace.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that you are here. So many folks made their start in SharePoint, and that's because for me it was that because SharePoint really helped, I'll call it the common business user, be productive on their own. I mean, they could create some calendars. They could create some task lists, some workflows, and make their day a little better without having to pick up the phone and talk to IT. And that was really the light bulb moment for me and why I wanted to dig into that technology. What was it for you that really drew you in?
It was a big gambit of, especially at that time, everyone, they were definitely like to throw the whole kitchen sink at SharePoint. Hey, can this thing make me some bread? They try to figure out how to get SharePoint to do that. So it was kind of interesting to go, all right, well, I have my wealth of graphic design and programming. So like, hey, how do I do this and have this a collaboration aspect? So it was kind of cool to start doing that and learning the automation, especially when it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It turned from at SharePoint 2013 to 16, 19, how did that get bigger than now? What does it look like all on SharePoint Online? But kind of comes back to the point of today where I'm like super more into the security aspect of bringing that in is, to just say like anything SharePoint, they're like, hey, we have this file share server. Let's throw everything up on SharePoint. And it's basically the wild, wild west. So kind of leads into like how the Copilot aspect comes in and how does security and how does that get broken down? And same thing we're seeing with throwing everything up on SharePoint. Hey, how do you find it? And why does this person have access to it? It's the same issues you're going to have right now with going Copilot and not putting anything, some barriers around it.
Well, and you say it's the same issues. In my early days of SharePoint, it was SharePoint 2003. It was a financial institution, and they even just put the free version WSS out there, and set it to crawling content because they thought, hey, I want to be able to find my Word documents. Well, security by obscurity was a strategy for so many organizations for years, and initially enterprise search and even basic search really exposed the fact that that's a problem. Now that problem gets compounded when you get into the Copilot space.
Sure.
Maybe expose a little bit of why that is.
Yeah, so especially the way Copilot works is it starts searching across your data, uses systematic data, and it starts searching across not just SharePoint. You got Teams, OneDrive, emails. You start hooking up to your on-prem stuff. So it's it searches across the whole board and then makes this connection. And the way it also looks at it is when I do a search for something inside of Copilot, guess what? It returns everything that's there, but it also returns like if there's actually barriers around it. I shouldn't have access to financial data that I shouldn't have. So one, that makes it messy. Like, wow, I just got a lot of stuff come back at me versus I needed just this kind of data. And then also you're not having data risks kind of DLP going on where I shouldn't have had access to this, or I don't need to be sharing this out. So that's kind of where Copilot and people need to start thinking about before, hey, let's unleash it onto the world. Do we know purview? Do we have these barriers in place? So that way, one, you don't get DLP, you don't get the sensitive data leakage, and you also get the people are getting a better experience when they start returning information. They're getting the stuff that they need and what they have access to.
It's a really interesting point. We talk about, I mentioned security by obscurity, but it's not, in this scenario, it's not just about the fact that I'm going to get data back I shouldn't have access to see, but it's going to cloud the results with stuff that doesn't matter to the question that I've asked, and it's going to make it harder to get not just a right answer, but a usable answer.
Correct. Yeah, and this is going to keep learning and learning and learning off of what you're asking, what's available to you. How do you break that down and say what is search really? What that semantic search is going to start looking at it. How do we bring these things together and go? All right, Copilot, that's not exactly what I wanted. You can re-ask a question. It's funny how you can ask a question just to Copilot, and then you can ask again, like, "Are you sure about that?" Like you could do an email and hey, what is my boss? Give me a thing of the last week of my boss's emails, and it was like, I don't see any emails. Like, are you sure about that? I have emails. And it's like, oh, we have them now. So, it's not 100% all the time, but it's one of the things you can kind of ask her again, and she'll finally give you some answers. But you don't want everything under the sun when that happens.
That's right. You want just the right answer at just the right time if you're going to get usable content. All right, so that's the problem. The problem is, how do we make sure that users only see the data they are allowed to see or have been designated to see? And the second piece is, how do we make sure that it's not clouded with useless data so that the answers are better? So how do we prepare for that as companies are either thinking about rolling out or maybe even in the early stages of rolling out? What are some of the strategies that companies should be employing?
Yeah, I'm a big believer on root cause problems. Where it gets get down to the biggest. Let's get down to the root first. First, do you have are you managing your user risk? So is MFA put into place? Is conditional access put into place? What are we allowing to that? Do you have some kind of security structure that says, what is there? What are we going to allow? We let external users. We let internal users. Are we going to allow people to do Copilot off their phone? Are we going to, especially personalized phones? What kind of structure are we going to put there to make that happen? That's going to be some of the root line cause issues that we got going on. So setting those in place, especially with personalized devices. How do we do that so we don't have DLP? So people aren't taking screenshots and then passing that data on. So we put those barriers in place, using Intra ID, using Purview. So those things are, do we know those? Are we having those things set in place before we go, all right, let's release Copilot out to the world? Then we start getting into Purview, where you start doing sensitive data types, the labels, so that way we can start labeling information. Is this critical data? Is this, do we need to block this out so only certain people see? That's how you start blocking that, bringing the range around what Copilot brings. And then also when you start asking Copilot, hey, can you make a document off of this data that you just searched? So now what's nice is really about Copilot, it actually looks off the sensitive data labels and all the labels that are actually part of that were set up in Purview. It'll take that and go, oh, these had these labels already in place. Guess what? We're going to make a new document with those labels in place. It's going to inherit what it came off the search from. So setting those things up ahead of time, it's like that. The fun thing is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, if you don't get that stuff put in place right now, your Copilot experience will not be as the best what you want, right? At least right off the bat, right? As with SharePoint, we've all known, hey, let's take a file share, let's shove it up there, and then we'll clean it afterwards. That's I hear that constantly. So that's the same thing we're going to deal with here.
I know.
Well, why am I getting on this?
And another problem to that too is how many times do people, put some documents in a SharePoint folder and then they share that folder with somebody, go, well, here, you should be able to see it, and they can't see it, and so now they start monkeying with the permissions and over provisioning the permissions aspect, not even at that level, but at higher level. Great, I'll just go to the whole site and give you admin access. Now maybe you can see it. And instead of dealing with the problem efficiently or effectively, they have thrown the gate wide open, and now the person has access to way too much stuff. So part of this whole prepare for the security side of it is that cleanup of not only do we have the right people in here, internal, external, do the people who are in here have the right access identified throughout? And there's all sorts of areas, as you've mentioned and as I just mentioned, that you've got to look at.
Right, for sure.
You made the.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you make the comment, you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I wish some of these axioms, like garbage in equals garbage out, they've never been more true than when you start implementing an AI solution, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially like when you got BYOD coming into place also, how do you block those things where I don't want someone grabbing this and then, because Copilot's not your only search, you're your only chat GPT. So, you could put in those kind of barriers in place where we can start saying, all right, I don't want to if you take data out of this, we don't allow them to go other sites. So, that's data leakage that's not in your environment. So how do you block those? So start looking at those, having those rules in place, training the actual users, right? Like the biggest security risk in any environment is an actual user. It's not what you have and what you have there. It's the user is going to be your biggest data leakage that you have.
Well, and Corey, the reality is the scenarios we're talking about, whether it is lack of labels inside of documents or ineffective purview configuration, or if it is permissions that are set too wide or not knowing who your audience is. These are problems that exist today that have nothing to do with Copilot that just get expanded upon when Copilot shows up. So this is part of what I call the technical debt catalyst. So, and it's one of my favorite things about AI. And it's not the benefits you get directly from typing something in and getting a brilliant answer. It's the fact that we now have a reason to go back and do all the cleanup that we should have done before today.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about data overexposure, because that is ultimately people's primary concern. How do we make sure that individuals in the organization that shouldn't have access to specific bits of data don't? And two, how do we ensure that that data inside of the organization stays where it's supposed to be? What are if I were to ask you 3 things that a company needs to go do to prepare, like things that you think about when you go out and talk to customers, what do you tell them?
First, do you have the base structure in place? Do you have MFA? What are you doing? Do you have conditional access? How are you doing your BYOD, right? That's going to be your first point in line of how does data start getting out? Then in purview, do you understand purview? Do you have sensitive labels? So I asked, do you have a security and policy, conditional, or not conditional, like security and policies in place? So that way, or at least a document that tells us what we need to do is how do we start having this conversation? What apps do you guys have in place? Are you allowing third-party apps in? So start looking at how do we bring those in, especially within Purview. There's an actual, it's in preview right now, but there's actually a Purview data like search within Purview. They'll actually start searching your data. Then that way you can kind of come back and go, okay, this doesn't have a label. This doesn't have this, but it's in preview right now. It's not in GA, so I don't really want to go too far into that aspect. But start having that. Have these go out. And then also looking at what licensing do you guys have, right? Do you have just a business standard? Guess what? Unfortunately, you don't have those, but you can't have Copilot in the first place. But having a license that has Purview and the EMS suite available to you is going to be a great start of, how do you start getting these barriers in place?
Yeah. Now we talk about Copilot from the angle of now as if there was just one at Microsoft, and we know there is more than one Copilot found inside of every app, found inside of every data set and every browser. I mean, there's just various things. But there's also Copilots on the administration side, security specifically. So how are Copilots in and around the management of security, both on the Azure side as well as specifically here? How are they helping folks like yourselves to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, so as of the 1st, there will be a new one called Copilot for Security. And this one is going to really help kind of bring in, your SOC. How do you have your security people be able to look out and actually be able to handle what they need to handle at the time? So Copilot, I think people think that this is going to take over jobs. It's not how that works. Copilot is the same thing. It's like if I'm flying a plane, I have a Copilot that helps me along the way, helps me go, oh, this is happening over here. Let me know so I can handle it. So the same thing is with security. How does this happen? So you have any kind of security risk that comes in, Copilot can also help you let you know, and then also help you quickly understand what that risk is and how to handle that risk. So you're not sitting there doing, the Google search of going, all right, what do I need to do here, right? It's giving some of that information of going, all right, well, I have this happening. What do I need, what do I need to do on top of this? So that way you can handle multiple things at once versus going, all right, I have just one incident that I got to handle right here. It kind of allows you to do multitask and get a lot of things done. So it's going to be your Copilot when it comes into the SaaS stuff.
So it's they named it Copilot, not the HR Axeman, for a reason, because it's there to help you do what you do better. And think about professionals who are doing this work, whether you are a knowledge worker doing a job in the business, or whether you're on the administration or security side. Most of the time you're doing exactly what Corey's talked about, and that is you've got a mountain of tickets and work that needs to be done. You've got a ton of research to figure out how to do some of those things. It's here to help you do your job better, faster, more efficiently. Some cases it'll automate it, and it's going to give you time to do the things that humans do best. At Rackspace, we call these responsible AI solutions. We see that three core tenets of AI solutions when we talk about responsible AI solutions are that the first one, symbiotic. By the way, we love alliteration around here, but symbiotic, and that means that AI is here to make humans better, not to replace them. That it should also be secure, and then it should be sustainable. And sustainable meaning two different things. Of course, from the green side, we want to make sure that we aren't burning extra carbon that we don't need to, and then secondly, that these solutions aren't science projects that are so unwieldy that the normal person inside of an organization can't keep them alive and help them grow over time, because they do take care and feeding. But they're applications and they're solutions that they can sustain and help make work as time goes on. Well, Corey, part of the team that you're on gets out and helps companies think about this here at Rackspace. And of course, Rackspace, you're in my best benefactors because, every 2 weeks they send us a check, which I do love so much. But they're also the underwriters here in the program. And so we love to give a little specific highlight about the work that we get to do specifically for the organization. So we're gonna pop up. In fact, let's bring the QR code up now, Daniel, if you don't mind, for how companies can get started with Rackspace to help do some of the things we're talking about. But Corey, maybe you can talk about exactly what that is.
Yeah, especially on the Copilot front, we have a pre-flight, so we can start looking at how this is, how is your organization set up already? Looking at what do you have? Are you ready for Copilot? The biggest hurdles, like we talked about, is the security there, is the MFA there, what is there? So that way we can start helping you get started, right? The fun part of any journey is that first step. How do you get started when you start doing this? How do I do this? I'm a new person going into it. So how do I do that? You bring in a consultant that actually can have those conversations, have those experiences with you, and understand what does that roadmap look like? We don't throw the whole kitchen sink at it today. Let's not open up to everyone. How do we do this? How do we do that pilot group? Get these people going and start moving on. And then what you're bringing up the other times is what are these different flavors you guys have? If you have dynamics. Copilot for sales. How does that work? So, we are able to have those conversations across the whole board, and not just in Copilot. So, when we get into security, how do we really start having deep dive security talks of, across the whole infrastructure, but also in 365 and in Azure? How do we set up Purview? How do we set up correctly? So that way, when you do unleash this onto your company and allow them to enjoy the return, you can actually start, things are actually put into place, and you don't have to get a year down the road and redo stuff again.
Perfect. I love that so much. Now, folks, the QR code's on the screen that'll help you get signed up right away. It's going to take you actually to a site over at Rackspace's website called fair.rackspace.com. I talked a little bit about how we view responsible AI, and it's part of our whole foundry for AI at Rackspace. Now that's a subpage inside of there, but there at the root, fair.rackspace.com, you can learn more about what Rackspace does to help companies prepare for and utilize these AI solutions to make a massive difference in their organization. We've been doing this for almost a year, and 40 some customers out there who are actively using solutions that we are writing for them today. Some agent-based, some Copilot-based. There's all kinds of great stuff out there. Now, if you want to learn more about what's happening in the state of AI in the world today, I want you to do two things. One, mark your calendars for May 7th, 10 a.m., not 8:30, but 10 a.m. Central Time. And that's where we're going to do the Solve Summit, where we're going to unpack the research. So Daniel, let's flip up the QR codes for the latest research. That can be found right there. You can just also head over to rackspace.com/solve. That is our thought leadership program, the Solve Thought Leadership Program. And you can learn, you can get all the content, free content that you want over there. And if you want it, how do you call it? Infographic for the research is there, available to be seen, and then just a little bit of information, and you can have the research paper as well. But I'd love for you to go download that today. Corey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the program. You're going to be back because these co-pilots aren't going anywhere, and neither is the security that needs to be done to help shore them up. So thank you so much for taking time to be on the program today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Everyone, we're back next week. We're talking healthcare. That's right. If you are in the healthcare business, we are going to unpack the state of technology inside of healthcare. There's been some big conferences lately. We're going to tell you what's been going on there. It's going to be an amazing episode. So that's next Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. And I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, my name is Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist for us here at Rackspace. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and rest of your week.